Hi, I'm Dean Lewis, the executive producer for the Kaleidoscope Radio Magazine. And this is our audio training tape number 1, Side A, covering how to operate the studio control board. Before we get started, be sure you have the written materials in front of you. There are 2 pages covering the control board. The first page is a list of all the controls and their functions, which I will be reviewing shortly. The second page is a diagram of the control board, which shows you where to find, by number, each control on the list. By the way, please feel free to stop, rewind, or fast forward this tape as often as you like, should you want to review any of my instructions. To begin with, it's important to understand that control boards at all radio stations are basically the same. Here at ARN, we use the McMartin 5-pot control board. Once you learn how to operate this board, with a little adjustment, you'll be able to operate the control board at almost any radio station in the country. As a point of information, the term pot, which I used just a moment ago, is short for the more technical word potentiometer, which in layman's terms refers to any volume control knob. So when I say a 5-pot board, that simply means the board has 5 volume control knobs to mix the various audio sources, such as turntables, microphone, CD players, tape decks, cartridge machines, and so on. At first glance, the board may look very intimidating. All those buttons, switches, dials, and knobs. But I assure you, it's really very simple. If you listen to this tape carefully, follow my instructions, and practice about 4 or 5 times, you'll be able to run or operate the board in no time at all. You'll notice all of our boards have labels on most of the controls, indicating which button should be pressed in, what the knob setting should be, and so on. Once you're sure that all the settings are correct, well, the rest is easy. Basically, once you're set, you will only have 5 volume pots to control. When reviewing the various controls, there are only 3 terms that I'll be using, so please become familiar with them now. The first one is knobs. The second is the term switches. And finally, number 3, buttons. A knob is something you turn, just like any volume control knob. So if I say, turn the pot up, I'm referring to turning a knob. A switch, well, that's just what it says. Like a light switch that you switch up or down to turn the light on or off. Well, on the control board, our switches, instead of going up and down, turn to the left or the right to put the pot on or off. And finally, a button, which you press down on or press in. Normally, when you press one button, another button will pop out. For example, each of the 5 pots, or volume control knobs, can actually handle 2 different inputs, or 2 different audio sources. Therefore, you'll notice that above each pot, there are 2 buttons. They say input number 1 and input number 2. For example, input number 1 might be for a turntable, and input number 2 a CD player. Well, if you wanted to use the CD player, you would have to be sure that input number 2 was pressed in. If it wasn't, simply press the input number 2 button in, and you'll notice that the input number 1 button will automatically pop out or disengage. Also, I think it's important that you understand the general structure of a control board and why control boards may have so many buttons and dials. Our boards, like most in the industry, have 3 amplifiers. The first one is known as the program amp, which is the amp that we use to send the output of the board to the tape record or tape record deck. If you were on the air live, that amp would also send the signal directly to the transmitter. The second amp is known as the audition amp. By the way, we don't use the audition amp here at ARN. However, if the program amp were to fail, we could use the audition amp as a backup. The third and final amp is known as the Q amplifier, or Q amp. This allows you to listen to an audio source without the source actually going on the air. The main function of the Q amp is to cue up records to the start of the music before putting the turntable on the air. Since most of our announcers now use CD players, they cue up themselves. So the Q amp is rarely used anymore. To hear the audio source through the Q amp, you would simply turn the pot all the way down, basically to off. Then continue turning the pot until you feel or hear a slight click. That means that you're turning it actually past the off position. And that puts the pot into the Q position or Q amplifier. We'll be discussing more about that a little bit later on. But now, let's get started. Please turn to the first control board instructions page. It says control board directions at the top. I'll be reviewing every button, knob, and switch on the control board and tell you what it does and how it should be set for normal operating conditions. As I said earlier, most of the buttons, switches, and knobs I'll be referring to are labeled on the board so that learning them will be as easy as possible. Now, let's go to page 1. I'll go over each control, starting with number 1. I'll tell you its name and where to find it on the control board. Then I'll give you about 10 seconds to locate it or find it on the board. Then I'll tell you its function and the proper settings. The first control is called the monitor volume. This is a pot that's located in the upper left-hand corner of the control board. Its function is to control the volume of the speakers in your studio. This pot should be set at about 25% on, or 25% up. The pot should never be set any higher, because if your studio speakers are too loud, they'll be heard in other studios and disturb other announcers. As a point of information, there are no speakers connected to the control boards in our practice areas. Now, let's go to number 2. The second control is known as the monitor select. These are the 3 buttons located directly to the right of the monitor pot. These buttons select the audio source for the studio speakers. The program or PGM button should always be pressed in. Now, let's go to number 3. This is known as the line feed. These are the 3 buttons located immediately to the right of the monitor select buttons. These buttons determine where the output from the control board goes. The line A button should always be pressed in. Number 4. These are the headphone select buttons, which are located to the right of the line feed buttons we just discussed, and to the left of the Q volume pot. These buttons select which audio source or amplifier you'll be listening to in your headphones. For the most part, you'll want to hear the program amplifier, so the PGM button should be pressed in. Now let's go to number 5. This is the Q volume, which is the small pot located to the left of the VU meter and immediately to the right of the buttons we just discussed. This pot controls the volume of the Q speaker. The pot should always be set fully up, or at 100% on. The Q amplifier has very low power, and the Q speaker is actually located inside the control board. So, if the Q pot were to be set lower than 100%, you probably would not be able to hear it. Now, let's go to number 6. This is the VU meter or meters that are located in the upper right-hand corner of the control board. The VU meters measure the volume units going out of the board. The meter should generally read at 90 to 100%, peaking at +1 to +3. Look at the meter carefully. You'll see that it starts down on the left-hand side and goes up to 100%. Then it turns red, going into +1, +2, and so on. Once again, the meter should generally read at 90 to 100% and peak at +1 to +3. Peaking means the loudest point. Never run the board with too little or too much output. If your meter is reading too high, you could be distorting. If the meters are too low, you're not putting enough audio signal on the tape, which could result in tape hiss or tape noises when the tape is played back at a higher volume to compensate for the low signal that was put on the tape originally. We'll be talking more about that on our VU meters training cassette. But right now, let's go back to our control list. And we'll go to number 7. These are the input select buttons located above each of the 5 main pots on the board. Please take a look at the board, and you'll see the 5 pots, and directly above each pot, there are 2 buttons. They select the audio input for that particular pot. The correct setting is the piece of equipment you want that pot to control. For example, pot number 2 can be used to control 2 things, either turntable number 1 or CD player number 1. Not both at the same time, either one or the other. So, if input number 1 were pressed in, and you wanted to use the CD player, you simply would have to press in input number 2. Input number 1 would automatically disengage. or pop out. Now let's go to number 8. These are the switch keys that are located immediately above each pot. Basically, their function is to turn the pot on or off. The middle position is off. To send the signal to the program amp, which is the amplifier we use, the switch goes to the right. So, middle position is off, and to the right is on. If you were to turn the switch to the left, that would send the audio to the audition amp, or AUD amplifier. Since we don't use the audition amplifier in our control boards, once again, its middle position off, and to the right would be on. Number 9. These are known as the pot knobs, which are the 5 large volume controls that control the volume levels of each individual input, such as the microphone, turntables, CD players, cart machines, cassette playbacks, and so on. The proper setting is the volume needed to maintain your VU meter at a proper level. The proper setting would usually be about halfway up or at about the 12 o'clock position. And finally, number 10. This is known as the master control pot, and it's located directly below the VU meter. This pot controls the total volume going out of the control board. The normal setting is 75% on. If this pot was set lower than 75%, the individual pots would then have to be run higher to compensate for the lower output setting. If the master pot were to be set higher than 75%, then all the other pots would have to be run lower to compensate for that higher output. If your individual pots have to be run too low, you would not be able to do slow fades on your music. And it would make doing voiceovers, which means mixing your voice with the music, too difficult to control properly. Now, please turn to page 2, where we have an actual diagram of the control board, showing you the location of all the controls we just discussed. This will allow you to study the control board while reviewing this tape at home. Below the diagram are the standard settings for the input select buttons on all of our control boards, with only 1 or 2 exceptions that are described at the bottom of the page. You'll notice that pot number 1, input 1, is the control board microphone. Input number 2 might be used for a guest mic. The second pot, input 1, is used for the left turntable, sometimes known as turntable or TT number 1. Input number 2 is CD player number 1. The third pot, input 1, is the right turntable, sometimes known as turntable number 2. Input number 2 controls the CD player number 2. The fourth pot, input 1, is the cart playback machine. In most studios, input 2 is not used. And finally, the fifth pot. Input 1 is the cassette playback deck, and that's usually cassette deck number 1. And input number 2 is cassette deck number 2 playback. And that is the cassette deck that we normally use as our main recording deck. Now I suggest you get the feel of the board. Play with the various controls, but please be gentle. Be sure you don't hit the buttons or switches too hard, and raise and lower the pots slowly. You might want to play back a CD and use the microphone, or put a CD in each of the CD players, or put a record on each turntable, and raise and lower the pots to get the feel of mixing the music. One final point. Be sure to set all the buttons and switches back the way they were before you started. In other words, it's okay to play with all the buttons and dials, but please reset the board to its proper positions before leaving. Check the labels if necessary. And by the way, if something is not clear to you, please review this tape again, or if necessary, ask an employee to help you. This ends the control board directions. Thank you for listening, and good luck.
And in an interesting manner, and with authority. Here are the announcing and speech variables. Number 1, pace. This is how fast or slow you are talking. You should be able to announce about 150 words a minute, the average number of words in a 60-second spot. Copy with more or less words may require you to change your pace. Number 2, pitch. This refers to the highs and lows in your voice. Your pitch should change in order to emphasize or color various words in your copy. Changing your pitch avoids sounding monotone and uninteresting. Number 3, volume. This refers to how loud or soft you speak. To speak with authority, do not speak too softly or with your mouth always partially closed. Avoid mumbling or slurring of words. Number 4, emphasis. When you increase your pitch, you are giving more emphasis. The more you emphasize a word, the more meaning it's given. Key words should always be emphasized, adjectives, product, sponsor, names, etc. 5, coloring. Changing your pitch or pace in a way that becomes descriptive of a particular word. For example, the word long should be stretched out to sound long. Short should be said faster to sound short. The exercises below and on the following pages should be worked on while you're listening to this exercise tape. Now, let's discuss emphasis. These exercises should clearly demonstrate how placing emphasis on a particular word can totally change the meaning of what you say. A, I didn't say he stole that dog. I didn't say anything. Someone else said it. B, I didn't say he stole that dog. I did say something, but not that. C, I didn't say he stole that dog. I didn't say it. I might have implied it. D. I didn't say he stole that dog. I didn't say he did it. I said she or someone else did it. E. I didn't say he stole that dog. Not stole it. He lost it. F. I didn't say he stole that dog. Not that dog. He stole another dog. G. I didn't say he stole that dog. Not the dog. I said he stole the cat. Now, let's go to page 2. The subject is word coloring. The following exercise demonstrates word coloring, announcing in a descriptive manner. A. Listen to how I announce each word in such a way that it gives real meaning. A. Love. Hate. B. Exciting. Dull. C. High. Low. D. Beautiful. Ugly. E. Loud. Quiet. F. Soft. Hard. G. Long. Short. H. Fantastic. Boring. And now number 3, pace and timing. The commercial below contains 75 words and should be announced in 30 seconds. Underlined words should be emphasized. Circled words should be colored. Using a timer or stopwatch, continually announce the copy until you do it in exactly 30 seconds. Then change your pace and do it in exactly 35 seconds. And then do it in exactly 25 seconds. Here's a suggestion. Put a dot over the word collection to mark the halfway point in the copy. When you reach this point, quickly check your time, use a pencil on the copy so you don't lose your place. You should have exactly 15 seconds left. This is midpoint. If not, adjust your pace slightly slower or faster in order to end on time. And now, here is the commercial. This Sunday only, Carpet World is holding a giant clearance sale on every carpet in stock. Prices reduced up to 70% off. Now's the time to replace that ugly carpet. Choose from Carpet World's magnificent collection of cut piles and broadlooms at savings you won't believe possible. That's this Sunday only, an exciting day of savings at all Carpet World stores. Call 800-554-2300 for the store nearest you. Now, you stop this tape and try it over and over again until you get it in exactly 30 seconds. Then after that, change your pace and do it in exactly 35 seconds. And then do it in exactly 25 seconds. And now, number 4, missing ing or ing sound. In careless speech, there is often a substitution of n for ing. Going becomes goin', etc. If you have this problem, practice the following words that end in ing. Continue to practice daily to break the habit. As an exercise, I'm going to announce each word correctly. After hearing each word, you try. Now let's begin. Breathing. Nothing. Coming. Eating. Playing. Working. Drinking. Studying. Listening. Talking. Cleaning. Asking. Walking. Dealing. Thinking. Anything. Hearing. Seeing. Doing. Crying. Lying. Drawing. Living. Saying. Swimming. Speaking. Dancing. Ringing. Going. Writing. Rowing. Running. Reading. Trying. Rising. Falling. Now, let's do the same exercise in a sentence. A. Watch what you're eating and drinking. B. Swimming and rowing are good exercises. C. Are you going to pick up the cleaning? D. Is the elevator going up or coming down? E. Are you going to go walking with us? F. Are you working or studying? G. I am thinking of buying that writing desk. H. She was breathing heavily and crying. I. Listening is as important as speaking. J. I am thinking while I'm talking. Now, let us turn the page. Number 5, the TH sound, or the th sound. If you have a problem with the TH sound, practice the following words as you listen to this tape. Thank. Thatch. Thaw. Theater. Theatrical. Theft. Theme. Theodore. Theology. Theological. Theory. Theoretical. Therapeutic. Therapy. Thermal. Thursday. thermostat, thesaurus, thesis, thespian, thick, thicket, thief, thigh, thin, thing, think, third, thirst, 13, 30, thought, thousand, thud, thug, thunder. Now, let's try them in a sentence. A thief stole 30 thin thermometers and 1,000 thimbles on Thursday. B. A thespian used a thesaurus when he wrote his thorough thesis on the theory of the theater. C. Theodore thought of things that related to therapeutic techniques. Now 6. Missing sounds. Here are a number of words from which sounds are frequently omitted. If necessary, practice announcing these words by duplicating exactly what you hear on this tape. Do this exercise as many times as necessary. Little, battle, gifts, kettle, gentleman, mountain, bottle, 20, sentences, gifts, artists, guests, government, student, wanted, Tuesday, family, company, opportunity, single, longest, youngest, clothes, depths, strongest, general, recognize, library, cruel, picture, comfortable, February, ridiculous, temperature, chocolate, Saturday. Now let's move on to 7, the word slurring. Here are a number of words that are often slurred. If necessary, practice announcing these words and sentences by duplicating exactly what you hear on this tape. Practice these exercises as often as necessary. Girl, gale. curl, kale. Pearl, pale. Fern, fun. Shirt, shut. Hurt, hut. Early, oily. Learn, loin. Bird, Boyd. Bird, bud. Girl, gull. Burn, bun. Furl, foil. Verse, voice. Curl, coil. Curt, cut. Person, poison. Turn, toy. Now, let's use these words in sentences. A, the girl got caught in a gale. B, the pearl was very pale. C, I go to work after I wake up. D, shut the door and put your shirt on. E, I was hurt in the hut. F, it was too early to be oily. G, Boyd had a pet bird. H, I had to curl up the coil. I, the gull flew to the girl. J, please do not burn the bun. K, there was a certain verse in his voice. L, he was very curt when he said cut. M, the person did not take poison. N, a bird in hand is worth two in the bud. O, I did a turn when he dropped the toy. Thank you for listening, and listen to this tape as many times as you wish to. Thank you very much.